I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects and James' respects to the elders, past, present and emerging. It is a particular honour today to open what is a festival of adulation for Jackie Charles. Firstly, because she successfully produced a real-world printed version of a digital publication. Well done, Jackie. You may remember paper, here it is. And also it has terrifically attributed artworks, including, but also because Justice McCullum is here today to speak. Sorry? Adulate and only in at the highest level of adulation which Jackie deserves. So, Justice McCullum, please.
I have to admit that I got this gig for myself. I sent Jackie a text a couple of days ago saying, "Is anyone speaking for you at this launch?" And she said, "No, should I have organised a speaker?" And I volunteered myself. And I'm going to come shortly to talk about the rule of law, which is an important aspect of this incredible report that Jackie's produced. But one of the aspects of the rule of law is the independence of the judiciary, and so I thought I should make a disclaimer that I have no independence when it comes to Jackie Charles. I love this woman. I love her so much. She's a climbing buddy, she's a friend, she's been a mentor to my daughter, so there's no independence there. All right, that said, so I was looking at, I was sort of researching about the rule of law in order to explain how exquisitely brilliant Jackie's report is in feeding into the importance of the rule of law. And I went to university under one of the professors at UNSW was Professor Martin Krieger, who has made a life study of the rule of law. He's published many, many papers about it. And I came across this quote from a paper he wrote. "Over some 30 years, I have struggled to reach some clarity about the rule of law and why, as I believe, it matters so. This paper gives some account of the reasons for the quest, some of the dragons that needed to be slain along the way, the glittering but elusive prize, and why, after so long a trek, there still appear to be long tunnels at the end of the light." And it occurred to me that if there be dragons along the path to understanding the rule of law, Jackie Charles is the St George to those dragons. As a judge, and Justice Bellew's here tonight, and he understands too, we sit in court with this sort of weary acceptance that the rule of law is important to what we do, but we don't really have a conception of what that means. And it is a protean concept, but Jackie used to enter our courtrooms with these 20 students and her gorgeous bright outfits and her red lipstick and just sort of breathe life into the courtroom. And we're accustomed to the idea that justice has to be conducted openly, but it feels more open when Jackie brings a group of students into the courtroom and you're talking to them and they're talking to you. And what her report, which I've been reading over the last couple of nights, really captures well is the importance of bringing young people into the fold and understanding why we are doing what we do and having some connection with the legal system. And that process of understanding the importance of education of diverse people from culturally diverse and socio-economically diverse groups, coming actually into the courtroom, meeting a judge, one of them, as Jackie told me, asking Francois Kuntz how much he got paid. I think did one of them ask you, Jeff, what car do you drive? Or if anyone wants to know what car drives a Mustang, which is really cool, but I'm not sure if the students got that out of him or...
No, they asked me. One asked me, how did you get to be a judge? And I said, I have no idea. My detractors would probably say the same.
Not true. Also a dragon slayer, Justice Bellew. But I just wanted to commend Jackie, and the reason I asked her if someone was speaking was because I thought it's really important for someone to stand up and say what an incredible journey she's been on. She's been thinking about these issues for years in ways that would put many academics and lawyers to shame, and really understanding the importance of making the law, if I could use a young person's term, relatable to all manner of people. So congratulations, Jackie, on a fantastic report, and also I think I mentioned that I love Jackie because we go running together, and can we go climbing next Thursday?
So thank you so much, Lucy, and thank you to all of you that are here, and there's lots of people watching online. It's really hard for me to articulate how grateful I am for the support that I've had over many, many, many years. I've got a short PowerPoint. As I explained, it's mostly pictures, because I understand that a lot of you are lawyers and words are tiring and hard, and pictures are good. So I'm just going to have Nick flick over to that. This is Nick Clark, and I'm just going to explain for a moment who Nick is. Nick is the person that started this whole thing. He kind of suggested that I go and work with him at the Rule of Law Institute many, many years ago. And I, jumped into what effectively was very dark and murky waters, not really knowing what we were doing. And it took us many years to develop the ideas, many of which the culmination you will see tonight. And without Nick, I wouldn't be here. Also, he's running the tech, so it's really important to be nice to the people that run the tech. So I might start the PowerPoint. Can you? Oh, it's the other way. Here we go, technology, it's a thing. Oops. So I'm going to start just talking very, very briefly, which, as all of you know, is highly unlike me, about why I ended up here, because I think that's an important thing. Firstly, that's my street cred. I'm very grateful to the Churchill Trust and the Northern Districts Education Centre and their founder and leader, Peter Merry, who have been incredibly supportive of my work. I'm going to start off, I had to choose a picture of me looking vaguely professional. That was quite hard. As most of you will know, most of the pictures of me, my mouth is open. That is one of the very few in existence where it is not. I started off working at the Rule of Law Institute and thinking a lot about how to teach teenagers about legal concepts like the rule of law that were dry and, to be frank, a little bit dusty. And Nick and I spent a lot of time working on approaches that we could use. We taught ourselves how to summarise case law. We taught ourselves how to articulate some of these incredibly difficult and complex ideas in a way that were not only relatable, as Lucy said, but attractive to young people. And as a result, I travelled all over Australia. I tried to choose appropriate photos of South Australia, Western Australia, Queensland, and within New South Wales, speaking to young people and their teachers about the rule of law and about law in general, and always with the cornerstone of something that was happening at the time, something in the community, something in the media that they could understand and relate to their own communities. And oddly enough, no one had really done that before we did. Over that time, we gradually came to the realisation that taking students to court was something that we needed to be doing, and we kind of fell into it. There was a school in Wagga, they were coming to Sydney, and they went, yeah, we thought it'd be great if we could just go to court. And I went, oh yeah, I'll take you. As many of you know, I'll just do anything on the fly because it might be fun. It was an absolute shambolic mess of biblical proportions, but it kind of spawned this idea of let's start taking students to court, let's have them meet judges, let's bridge that gap of judges are people too. I know some of you are shocked. And also that the law is not this musty old thing that is not for young people, but it is something that's integral to our society, and it's something that we all have ownership of. So I kind of formulated this idea of what I call court education, but in other jurisdictions they call it all sorts of things. They call it public legal education, or just legal education, or civics. It's got a lot of definitions, and if you're brave enough to read the report, you'll see that I try to address those in as brief a way as possible. But the definitional issues are really not that relevant, because the idea is simple, which is, can young people go into a court building and interact with it in a positive and educationally beneficial way? And when I formed the view that perhaps the Churchill Fellowship was the way for me to further my knowledge in this area, I suspect that one of the things that the Trust really liked was the simplicity of the idea. I wasn't trying to do anything fancy. I was just trying to get a better idea of how to educate young people about the law. So for those that are education nerds, most of you can read.
What's
Yes.
gaming?
Gaming is playing games, and I'll talk a little bit about that. It's become one of the really most interesting and revolutionary ideas of teaching legal concepts.
Shoot the judge.
There's a great one that I can recommend.
Grand theft auto in courtroom.
Well, funny you should say that, but there is a game you can play. It's by an American company called iCivics, and it's all about running a law firm, and it's the best fun. Like, I may have used it to be the clerk that I am today. So
You realise we're all embarrassed because we don't want to run a law firm.
that's why I'm here. Unfortunately, because of the impact of COVID, I was unable to go on my extremely fantastic trip overseas, which I won't dwell on because I'll just cry. But what I was able to do was come here, which I think was, like a lot of things that have happened to me in my career, by accident or by Tronson, I think, which I'm not sure if Tronson's a verb, where Brenda called me during my summer holidays and went, yeah, have you ever considered clerking? And I'm like, what even is that? Anyway, I ended up in this beautiful place with these incredibly generous people, and as a result, I was able to find a way through not being able to go on my Churchill trip, and eventually in January, I spent 5 weeks sitting at that desk in Newcastle. Occasionally I went to the beach. There are some photos. Talking to people around the world about the work that they do in courts with young people. And it was just an incredible experience. Firstly, it was immensely humbling because these people at the time in January were in lockdown. In the US, they were going through the events of the Capitol riots. It was an incredibly turbulent time globally, and yet very smart, very learned and very capable people would spend hours on Zoom to me talking about their work. Yvonne Richards, who will be watching tonight, who is from a group called Young Citizens in the UK, even made a very elaborate PowerPoint, which she said was great because she was in lockdown and she just needed something else to do, and she made me a PowerPoint. And we had one of the best conversations that I had throughout my research. This is just a snapshot of some of the people that I spoke to. You will notice there's a mix there of courts and not-for-profit organisations. I'll just go through them very quickly. Justice for All is an organisation based in the federal court in New York. It is run by an incredible federal court judge called Judge Katzman. He just woke up one day and went, we need to have kids in court and we need to educate them. And I think he just went to all his judges, this is what we're doing now. And they all went, okay, because you're in charge. And he has put together an incredible program. I spoke to Magistrate Scanlon, who's part of that program in New York, and discussed some of the work that she's been doing with young people there. Nova Scotia is a province in Canada. I spoke to the media officer at the Nova Scotian courts. They're doing incredible work with their Native American young people in running Justice Camp Days, where all of the court staff chip in, give them pizza, bake brownies, and they get every Native American lawyer, court staff, judge, whoever they can find, to come to the court on that day to speak to those young people so they can meet people that look like them. I'm moving too much. Young Citizens I've already mentioned. the federal courts in the United States do an incredible job of educating their young people. And iCivics was one of the biggest organisations I spoke to. They are huge. They were started by Sandra Day O'Connor, former Supreme Court Justice. Their patron is now Sonia Sotomayor, and they make games. They make civics games for kids, and they are made by a company called Filament Games based in Wisconsin, and they are incredible. They are fun, really, really competitively fun. There's a leaderboard. They are engaging. They are educationally rich. They are now multilingual and used as literacy tools to teach Latino American children and children who are there as migrants English and law at the same time. They are just the best. The Marshall Brennan Constitutional Literacy Project is something that I'm hoping to start in Australia. They partner with law schools. The third-year law students go into schools. They spend a semester teaching children in that school advocacy and law, and then they run a national mooting competition. It's incredible. They want to come, they want to run it here with law schools here. They said, yes, we'll just give you all our stuff. The American Bar Association, the Supreme Court in the UK, all of these people are doing amazing work. I'll jump ahead to more pictures because too many words. One of the difficulties of not going overseas is that part of the Churchill trip is you're meant to document your journey. It's a little bit tricky to do when...
What does your dog do?
Oh, now that's Bear. So Bear is the dog at the cafe in Carrington in Newcastle where I used to go and have my morning coffee, because the way I'd do my day was I'd get up at about 4 a.m. and I'd be on Zoom from about 4:30 to about 10 a.m, give or take a bit, and then I'd have a break and I'd go and get a coffee, and then I'd go back, do some writing, have a nap, go to the beach, do my washing, whatever, and get back on Zoom about 5 o'clock in the evening.
Chips, apparently.
Yeah, lots of fish and chips, really good fish and chips.
That looks like calamari and chips.
I didn't have a car, so I rode my bike everywhere, so you can see that. And I was right near the port. I spent a lot of time walking around the port. But Bear is the most gorgeous dog. And when you go to the cafe, there are all these signs going, don't feed Bear. And Bear can't read because Bear's a lab. And Bear just is the most beautiful dog that has a really special relationship with a lot of the people. And the community of Carrington really just embraced me. I met an amazing man called Billy Lamb, who I'll talk about in a little bit. And they really gave me a safe haven to do this work and think about these things. And I had a lot of conversations with people in coffee shops and elsewhere. David Thieck, who's here tonight, came up and visited me and spent a lot of time walking around, listening to me talk about quite boring things and helping me formulate my ideas. So it was a journey in many ways. It was also 5 weeks living by myself, which I highly recommend for everybody who's got families. It was really, really good for me. It was amazing on so many, many levels. And it was thanks to the generosity of the Churchill Trust, who are an incredible organisation, and I can't speak more highly of them. They have been such a great support through what has been quite a difficult journey, and they are just so enthusiastic about supporting innovation and excellence in Australia in a way that when you go to their functions, you meet these people and everyone's excited about everything. They're just all a bit like me. And so I always just feel so at home. The noise level's frequently quite high, but it is just such an honour to be one of their number. And there is just so many exceptional Churchill Fellows. You would have all received by email, and there's a paper copy available for tonight of the report, and some of you have even read it, which never ceases to amaze me, because it's really long, and writing it was quite a challenge. I got back from Newcastle straight into Chambers, and I wrote it at night and on the weekends in bits. I have to thank my incredibly intrepid proofreaders. Michael, our head of Chambers, read it a couple of times and said nice things. Occasionally went, look, it's not quite making sense, but you seem to be on the right track. And Pat Lane, who's not here, Hilary Kincaid, who's not here, and a number of other people, including Sophie, who's sitting at reception, read it, gave me feedback, helped me make it sense. Pat was the greatest eliminator of the passive voice that I've ever met, which I tried not to take too personally. So it was a bit of a labour of love and also, in my view, a starting point for what comes next. The findings, I'm just going to be very brief about. Basically, we're more similar than we think. The common law world is amazing. There is nothing more delightful than talking about really old medieval case law with people in other countries. I just want to put that out there. Also, the commonality of the way that we conduct ourselves in our legal system, the way that we administrate justice, that philosophy is the same. And everyone shares it when you go out into the common law world, even the Americans, which was quite surprising. Everyone is worried about their young people. They're worried about them not understanding the world in which they live, their civic obligations, their legal obligations, their rights and their responsibilities. And everyone's concerned about what they see as a lack of engagement. But what's really interesting is it's not a lack of engagement, it's just that we're really boring. And when something like the Capitol riots occurred, the young people were engaged. They were very engaged. When other big events like the climate march that happened today, they were engaged. It's not that they're not engaged, it's just that they're not engaging in a way that we may have at the same age, and we have to adapt. I realised that we really had to have the words and the way of articulating what best practice was. And I was amazed at how I was able to negotiate with very large organisations like the American Bar Association for their intellectual property. I think Michael and Wen might have to cover their ears as RIP experts. They were just like, here are all our files, please have them. And I went, well, we might have to change them a little bit, but not much. And they were like, yeah, that seems fine. And I was like, thanks. And I'll be disseminating those to courts and other organisations around the country so they can run similar programs without having to go through that whole development phase, because many of these programs have been running for 30 years or more. My recommendations ultimately can be surmised in sort of two bits. Firstly, we have to organise and we have to articulate what we want to do. If we want to educate young people about courts and law, we have to be able to demonstrate what that looks like and what outcomes we can expect. The reason is most of these programs are funded by external philanthropic funders or governments, and they are nitpicky about where their money goes. They want to see definable change, not just, oh, look, it feels really nice to tell young people about this stuff. They want to see a drop in the rates of crime among young people. They want to see a change in engagement and knowledge. They want to see some kind of discernible effect. And a theory of change, which is an idea I got from young citizens, is a really good way of articulating that. Next, we need educators like Joe, who's here tonight, and others in courts. Not just like I was, sort of flitting from floor to floor, hoping a judge would take pity on me when I sort of grinned at them from the door, but actually in courts, working within the system to educate not just young people, but other members of the community. And that's a view that's been controversial. I had a very lengthy email from a court educator in WA who said, I agree with everything you say except this point. I'm just not sure this can work because funding is always an issue. But there has to be a change, and that change will generate greater funding and greater engagement, and that's what I've seen in the US particularly. Professional engagement by people such as yourselves and others is really crucial. There is engagement in Australia, but it is patchy and it is often reliant on what I like to call that charismatic individual. That one person that just goes, you know what, this is important. When that charismatic individual moves on or gets bored, then the programs die off or they stop, We can't have that. It has to become something that is part of the fabric of what legal professional organisations, teaching organisations, courts, academia, everybody does. It can't be this sort of periodic patchwork that we currently have. And lastly, that we need to have best practice, because ultimately, no matter how good it might make us feel to talk to young people about law, unless they're actually learning something, it's not really worth what we're doing. So I was able to actually write a taxonomy, which surprised me, because I didn't expect this to be an outcome. I was hopeful that it might be, but I thought it's a bit ambitious. And because I suffer with a goodly dose of imposter syndrome, I was a bit concerned that I was telling people how to suck eggs. But really, it sort of just came to me, not in a vision, but on a bike ride in Newcastle. You'll be surprised to know that we needed to really get to the heart of what we had, the elements that needed to be contained in any program that we delivered for young people and anybody really. And that's they have to be explicitly mapped to curriculum, because otherwise courts and teachers won't engage with it. It needs to be relevant to students, to their community. And now this is a controversial point, because a lot of young people's communities don't look like this room. They are more diverse. They are more culturally and linguistically different. They may even be racially different or religiously different. And some of them might even be a bit cross with us because they don't like the way that we treat them as a community. So we have to do the work to ensure that we're engaging with them where they're at. I had a wonderful conversation with one of the educators at the Supreme Court in the UK, and he was a very old school UK civil servant. His name's Simon. And Simon said to me, he said, one day I just realised that I just have to get people that look and sound like the students talking to the students. And I rang some people and I said, I want this. And he said, and then these people arrived. They were people who were from a very diverse number of backgrounds, and they spoke to the students. And I managed to see that at once in my research, and it was amazing to see a woman of colour working as a Crown prosecutor in the UK, speaking to girls of colour at a school in rural England, and it was magic. It was just the best. And I just thought, how good is this? We need to work harder to make that happen. And we can't just rely on that token Asian person or token Indigenous person or token Sudanese person. We actually have to have those people represented in our legal community and celebrated and supported so that we can grow our diversity, actively grow. I've spoken about engagement, collaboration, and promoting diverse perspectives. We have to be honest with young people. They hate us. They hate it when we lie to them. They hate us. They hate it when we say to them, "Oh, I know you're engaged with Black Lives Matters, but let's learn about this historical dude who did something." They're not interested in that, and they'll push back fairly hard. That also requires us to do the work because we're the grown-ups in the equation. But I think we can, and many, many people, particularly in the US, are doing that work. iCivics in particular wrote a paper that really changed my research, and it's about equity, and it's about what does equity actually look like. And it articulates or attempts to articulate that difficult question. And I think that's something that really resonated with me as being very, very relevant for Australia and the community we have now. We need to represent disabled students better. They're not represented at all, except in one resource that I found. So we just need to give them that visibility like we give other diverse groups in our community. Lastly, I wanted to show this picture. Billy is an artist, an educator, a former dock worker and a beer drinker. And he sits on a milk crate outside a restaurant in Carrington where I was staying and paints every day. Drinks beer, paints and chats to people. And Billy and I spent many, many happy hours talking about education, young people, Indigenous issues, other issues. And he spent many, many years when he wasn't working at the port in Newcastle, going into schools and teaching children how to paint Indigenous art and teaching them Indigenous culture. And Billy had this view that I couldn't help but agree with, which is if we can all just sit down together and chat about the difficult things and the legal things and the pain that comes with that from what we've done in the past, then we can move forward as a community. And I think that for me, that's what I want to do with this report and the work that I've done. I want people to collaborate. I want them to talk. I want them to work out how to be better and do better. And I want them to get excited about it. It's a sad thing for me that not everyone is a law nerd. I understand, you know, it's my poor, very long-suffering partner, Tim, who couldn't be here tonight, is one who has suffered greatly with law nerdism. When I go, and there's this case and it's super cool and let me talk it to you hours, I will talk to you about it. But law is fundamental to our community. It's fundamental to our society, and we need to have our community, our young people, understand it and engage with it. And legal literacy is something that everybody needs, because we all engage with legal documents, legal processes all the time. And the more legal literacy we can have as a community, the better we can contribute and the better we can be. And that's ultimately my dream. It's a little ambitious. But I'm going to start with doing this event, and I'm speaking at a number of other events. I'm also hoping to run a conference in Queensland in January, where court educators from Australia and also from around the world can get together and just chat about the work they're doing, write papers, get taken seriously by somebody, perhaps getting a Chief Justice or other prominent members of courts and government departments to put their hand in their pocket and go, I'll run a program, I'll do this. I'll publicise it. I'll stick with it for more than 5 minutes, because this is a long, long game. And I want to just end with a couple of thanks. Firstly, to my parents. They've been amazingly supportive of me throughout this. They have also put up with me ranting about it a bit. They're watching tonight from Byron Bay. To my partner Tim and my children Sophie and Max. They too are very tolerant of my eccentricity and the focus that this is required. There's many, many weekends, many nights, during COVID, a few tears about just thwarted dreams that they've tolerated, occasionally just gone, there, that's more Max, and supported me. There are many, many other people from all the organisations that I mentioned, and people in this room, and some that are online and some that are not here, who have just been my rocks in so many ways. Lastly, I dedicated the report to my sister. She passed away a number of years ago from cancer, and just before she died, I sat in a room with my brother-in-law having a really difficult conversation. And we kind of agreed that we would try to live as she would have wanted us to live. And she was an incredible woman with an immense community spirit. She was not an old lady she wouldn't help or someone she wouldn't care for. When she lived in Darwin, she used to feed the Indigenous children in her neighbourhood meals because she was worried that they weren't getting enough vegetables. She was just somebody who's so mindful of others. And I'd sort of made a deal with myself that I would live as she would have wanted me to, and this is the part of that. You know, contributing what I can to the community. So thank you very much. I'm unsure if there's any questions on the stream. Probably not. Oh, questions. Right.
Explain the Churchill Fellowship.
So the Churchill Fellowship came about because when Sir Winston Churchill died, there was a national outpouring of grief because he was such an important figure for so many Australians, South Africans, British and New Zealand people. And there was a collection the Sunday after he died, and it was the biggest peacetime collection ever in Australian history to this day. I think it was something like $66 million off the top of my head. I could be wrong.
67.
Sophie is usually right. So 67. And that money was invested, and the view was taken that Sir Winston had benefited greatly from travel, admittedly some of it to places to let's say engage in colonial acts. Let's just call it that. And so the money would be used to give Australians and New Zealanders and people from Britain the opportunity to travel to learn more about a particular field. And there are Churchill Fellows in just about every discipline you can imagine. The only criteria is that you must be an Australian citizen over 18 and it can't be part of tertiary study. In practice, what that tends to mean is that the Churchill Fellows that I've met are usually experts in their field. They are usually the people that have spent a career, often working in a particular area, and they've formed the view that it can improve in some way. You know, perhaps it's a medical field, perhaps. I met a wonderful Churchill Fellow on Friday night at the medallion ceremony, and he learnt about coach building, which is basically fancy word for panel beating, but really old-fashioned ways of panel beating that are dying. You know, people don't do them anymore. And he's got a coach building workshop in Dubbo, and he fixes old cars in the way that they were made, which is amazing. He's also such a dude, like so interesting. Not unlike myself, a little bit full on, a little bit eccentric. But, you know, so the trust invests about $30,000 in each fellow, and that money traditionally was used to fly them overseas for 2 months, pay all their costs, and give them an opportunity to go and meet the people in their field and learn more, and then come back and disseminate it. And the dissemination is a really important part of it. It's not just about you get a free overseas trip, or in my case, trip to Newcastle. It's about...
It's good answer.
Almost.
It's another world.
It is, and you know, I, as I've told a number of people, best cream buns in Australia. I tested it for all of you. I sacrificed myself. But that dissemination, that sharing is really crucial. And it's interesting, when you apply for the fellowship, they ask you about that and you say something like, yeah, I'll tell some people some stuff. And in my case, I'll run a conference and I'll educate the world, which is, you know, possible. But I'm now, as I'm engaging in that process, wow, it's an amazing privilege to speak to people about these things, because often they really want to know a bit, perhaps not as much as I tell them, but they do, they're interested. And everyone who hears about this knows a little bit more, particularly people who work in the law, and they go, well, what can I contribute? How can I do more? How can I make a difference? So I think, you know, that's a very long answer, Janet, but thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No one else? Any online, Nick?
I've loved the comments that I'll show you later.
I'll just finish up very briefly and say, take what you have and use it. I think we're all given a gift. Sometimes that gift might be that we can make other people feel comfortable, or it might be that we've got a really large brain and we can sit in a room by ourselves and read law books and then talk to other people about what we read in those law books, or perhaps write them down in submissions, scream into the void and then go to court. I think that everyone's got something that they can do to make a difference. It's just a question of finding your thing. Now, it took me almost 50 years to find my thing, which can give some of you young ones hope. But it's such a privilege to be able to share a little bit of what you're able to do with others. You know, it just makes such a difference. And this journey that I've been on, metaphorical and physical, has taught me that. So, you know, obviously I expect all the barristers to be super well behaved on Monday. And the others to just go away and think about themselves a little bit. But, and thank you to all the people online. I know that pretty much somebody from every single organisation I spoke to is going to watch this video. Without them, this would not have been possible. They were so incredibly generous with their time, their expertise, and their thoughtfulness about what they spoke to me about. So thank you so much.